He slammed my head into the wall over a burnt steak. That's when I realized I wasn't married to a man. I was married to a monster. If you have a moment, I'd like to tell you what happened. Maybe it will help someone out there feel less alone. My name is Sarah Walker. I'm a 32-year-old school teacher living in a quiet town in Missouri. I've been married to Mike for 6 years. When we first met, he was charming, funny, and kind. He made me feel special, like I was the only person in the room. I thought I was lucky. I thought I had found my person. But over time, little things started to change. He'd make small comments about my weight or how I dressed. He didn't like my friends. He said they were a bad influence. Slowly, I stopped seeing them. Then he didn't want me spending time with my sister, Rachel. He said she was always filling my head with nonsense. I believed him. I wanted to keep the peace. I didn't want to fight. That night, everything changed. I had come home from a long day at school. My desk was piled with papers to grade, and I was tired. Mike wanted steak for dinner, so I started cooking while marking assignments at the kitchen table. I must have lost track of time, because the steak burned. Not badly, just a little on the edges. But when Mike walked in, he looked at the plate, then at me, and something in his eyes went cold. He didn't say a word. He just picked up the plate, threw it across the room, and before I could even move, he grabbed me by the arm and slammed my head into the wall. I remember the sound more than the pain. A dull thud, followed by ringing in my ears. My legs went weak. I slid down the wall, dazed. He stood over me, breathing heavy, then suddenly stormed out. Just like that. No apology, no explanation. I sat there for a long time before getting up. I cleaned the mess, finished grading the papers, and even put a fresh steak in the fridge for the next day. I told myself he was just tired, stressed. I told Rachel I bumped into a shelf while reaching for a pan. But that night, when I looked in the mirror, I saw it. A dark bruise forming on the side of my forehead. My eyes were swollen with tears, my lip trembling. And for the first time, I didn't feel like a wife. I felt like a prisoner in my own home. That was the night I knew something was very, very wrong. The next morning, Mike came home with flowers. A cheap bouquet from the gas station, but he handed it to me like it meant something. His eyes looked wet, like he'd been crying. He said, "I'm sorry, baby." I just snapped. You know, I've been under a lot of pressure at work. I wanted to believe him. I really did. I nodded, said it was okay, and we sat down for breakfast like nothing had happened. But inside, I felt cold. I felt numb. That one moment wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. Over the next few weeks, Mike started changing in ways I couldn't ignore. He didn't want me using my debit card anymore. He said he'd handle the money from now on. He made me cancel my small savings account, saying it was pointless for us to have separate funds. He watched every dollar I spent. If I bought something he didn't approve of, he'd call me wasteful or stupid. He hated the way I dressed. He'd say things like, "You trying to get attention from someone else?" Or, "Why are you wearing that? You look ridiculous." I started wearing plain clothes just to avoid the comments. He mocked my cooking almost every night, no matter what I made. If I didn't get dinner exactly how he liked it, he'd toss his fork down and push the plate away. Sometimes he wouldn't eat at all. Other times, he'd eat in silence and leave me to clean up the mess. In public, though, you'd think he was the perfect husband. He held my hand, smiled at me, even pulled my chair out at restaurants. Everyone said we were such a cute couple, but they didn't see the way his smile dropped the second we got back in the car. They didn't hear the names he called me or the way he made me feel like nothing. I stopped talking to my friends. I stopped answering Rachel's calls. I didn't want to lie to her anymore, and I couldn't tell her the truth either. That's when I started writing things down. In a cheap spiral notebook, hidden behind the books in my closet. Every insult, every threat, every shove, I documented it all. Dates, times, what he said, what he did. One night, after a small argument over dinner, Mike picked up a glass and threw it at the wall behind me. It missed my head by inches. Shards scattered across the kitchen floor. I stood frozen, heart pounding. In that moment, I knew. If I stayed, one day it wouldn't miss. I didn't tell anyone, but I started seeing a therapist named Linda. I'd found her online one night after crying in the bathroom with the water running so Mike wouldn't hear me. Her office was 20 minutes away, and I made excuses to get there. Groceries, school meetings, anything I could think of. Sitting in her cozy office, I felt like I could breathe for the first time in months. I told her pieces at first. How Mike got angry, how I always felt like I had to be careful, how I couldn't sleep. Linda didn't interrupt. She just listened, her voice calm and steady when she finally spoke. "You're not safe," she said gently, "and you need an exit plan." Those words stayed with me. I nodded, even wrote down a few steps. Open a private account. Gather important documents. Find a safe place. But when I got home, the fear crept back in. What if he found out? What if he hurt me worse? So I waited. I convinced myself I could handle it a little longer. Then came the barbecue. It was a Sunday afternoon. Mike had invited a few of our neighbors over. He was in one of his good moods, laughing, grilling, offering everyone beers. I stayed close, bringing out plates and napkins, pretending to be the perfect hostess. That's what he liked, when I made him look good. At one point, I accidentally brought out the wrong sauce. I grabbed the spicy one instead of the regular, something so small. But Mike's smile disappeared. Right there, in front of everyone, he snapped. "Can't you get anything right, Sarah?" he barked. The laughter stopped. Our neighbors looked uncomfortable. I forced a small laugh, trying to brush it off. "Sorry, my mistake," I said quickly. But Mike wasn't finished. He grabbed my arm hard and whispered through clenched teeth, "Get inside." Now, I obeyed. As soon as the door shut behind us, he shoved me against the fridge. The edge caught my side hard, and I cried out. He didn't even look sorry. Just stood there, chest heaving, and walked away like nothing happened. Later that night, I lay on the bed with my side aching. I didn't even cry. I just stared at the ceiling, wondering how this had become my life. I used to laugh. I used to dream. Now, I just counted the hours until he left for work. I whispered to myself, barely audible, "This isn't love. This is prison." And for the first time, I stopped making excuses for him. I stopped waiting for him to change. Something deep inside me began to shift. I wasn't ready to leave yet, but I was done pretending. After that night, something inside me switched. I wasn't brave enough to walk out yet, but I was done being helpless. I started planning, quietly, carefully, like my life depended on it. Because it did. The first thing I did was open a checking account in my name only. I went to a small bank 2 towns over, during a made-up grocery trip. I told them I wanted to keep it private. The woman behind the desk didn't ask questions. She just smiled and handed me the paperwork. Next, I started saving. A few dollars here and there, cash back from grocery trips, a tutoring side gig I picked up quietly at school. I'd tuck it in a hollowed-out book I kept on the top shelf of the closet. Mike never read anything. I knew it was safe. Then I bought a burner phone, cheap and small. I kept it hidden in a tampon box under the bathroom sink, somewhere Mike would never look. On it, I saved photos of bruises, voice memos of the names he called me, and copies of my journal entries. Every little piece of proof I could collect. But I needed more. Real proof. So I bought a hidden camera. It looked like a normal phone charger. I plugged it into the kitchen wall where Mike did most of his yelling. Every night, I'd quietly check the footage, save anything important to a flash drive, and then erase the rest from the device. Some nights I'd sit on the bathroom floor, watching videos of him screaming, threatening, throwing things. It made my skin crawl, but it also gave me power. Evidence. Truth. When I felt ready, I reached out to an attorney named Gloria Klein. A friend of Rachel's had used her during a custody battle. She was tough, no nonsense, and didn't flinch when I told her what was happening. She looked me dead in the eyes and said, "Get the evidence, and I'll handle the rest." I nodded. I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Not a big, loud kind of hope. Just a small flame inside me that hadn't gone out yet. I still came home every night and smiled like nothing was wrong. I still made dinner and nodded through Mike's insults. But behind the mask, I was building my way out. Quietly, carefully. The countdown had started. He just didn't know it yet. It was a Thursday night. Nothing special. I had baked chicken, steamed vegetables, and a potato in the oven. Simple, nothing fancy. I was running late from tutoring, so the potato had cooled down a little by the time Mike got home. I didn't even think it mattered, but apparently it did. He walked in, tossed his keys on the counter, and sniffed the air. "What's this?" he asked, already annoyed. "Dinner," I said softly, placing the plate in front of him. He sat down, took one bite of the potato, and pushed the plate away like I'd served him garbage. "It's cold," he growled. "I can warm it up," I offered, reaching for the plate. But that was it. That one moment, so small to anyone else, was enough to make him explode. He stood up so fast his chair scraped against the floor. "You had one job, Sarah. One damn job." Before I could say anything, his fist slammed into the wall beside the table, just inches from my head. Drywall cracked and crumbled, and I froze. My body didn't move, but my heart was racing. Then he grabbed my phone off the counter and flung it straight into the sink full of water. The screen lit up, fizzed, then went dark. "You don't need that thing anyway," he snapped. "You just use it to talk to your whiny sister." I said nothing. I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I just stood there quiet now. But the whole time I knew. The camera and the wall charger, less than 5 feet from where he stood, had caught everything. His rage. His threats. The smashed wall. The phone in the sink. Every second of it. Later that night, Mike fell asleep on the couch like nothing had happened. I cleaned up the mess, fixed the wall as best as I could, and wrung out my dead phone with a towel. Then I tiptoed into the kitchen, retrieved the flash drive, and tucked it into my bag. I watched him sleeping, snoring softly like the world hadn't shifted under his feet. The man who once held my hand at our wedding, who swore to protect me, had become a stranger with fists and fury. I didn't feel scared anymore. I didn't feel small. I felt calm. I leaned against the doorway and whispered so quietly he couldn't hear, "Enjoy your last night of freedom." Because I had the proof now. I had the plan, and he had no idea what was coming. The next morning, I called in sick to work. My voice was steady as I spoke to the school secretary, but inside, I was shaking. Not from fear. This time, it was something different. I was finally doing something. I packed everything I had into a folder and a flash drive. Pictures of bruises, pages from my journal, saved videos from the hidden camera. I even brought the remains of my drowned phone. It still smelled faintly like dish soap. I met Gloria at her office around 10. She didn't say much at first, just opened the folder and quietly went through everything. Her eyes narrowed at the photos. Her jaw tightened while watching the video of Mike throwing my phone and punching the wall. When she finally looked up at me, her voice was clear and strong. "We've got him." We drove to the local police station together. Gloria had already called ahead and arranged a meeting with someone she trusted, Detective Ramirez. He was calm, serious, and didn't ask me to repeat the story more than once. He reviewed the footage and notes carefully, jotting things down in a small black notebook. "This won't be quick," he said gently, "but it will be done right. We're going to do this by the book. You're not alone anymore." For the first time in a long while, I believed that. Back at home, I acted like everything was fine. I made dinner, smiled when Mike walked in the door, and asked how his day was. He grunted, grabbed a beer, and went straight to the couch. He had no idea that just hours earlier, I had sat across from a detective who was quietly building a case against him. No idea that every horrible thing he'd done was now documented, filed, and backed by a lawyer who didn't scare easily. I played the role of the quiet wife one more time. I laughed at his dumb jokes, nodded along to his complaints about work, and tucked him into the lie he'd been living for years, that I would never leave, never fight back. But in my mind, I was counting the hours. Gloria and Detective Ramirez had a plan. There would be paperwork, timing, coordination with the arrest. It had to be perfect, and when it happened, I wanted it to be on my terms. In my house, on a night when he least expected it. Because this time, I wasn't the one waiting for the next blow. I was the one preparing to strike. Tuesday night came faster than I expected. I had everything ready: roast beef, mashed potatoes, his favorite red wine. The table was set like something out of a magazine. Candles flickered softly. A folded napkin rested on each plate. I even wore the dress he once said made me look decent. Mike walked in like he owned the world. He sniffed the air and smiled. "What's the occasion?" he asked, hanging his jacket on the back of a chair. "Just felt like doing something nice," I replied with a calmness I didn't feel. He sat down, poured himself a glass of wine, and dug in. "Finally made the potatoes right," he mumbled between bites. I nodded and smiled. My heart pounded the entire time, but my hands didn't shake. I had practiced this in my head for weeks. Every second was part of the plan. I kept glancing at the clock. The officers were supposed to arrive at 7:15. The roast beef wouldn't even be cold by then. At exactly 7:14, there was a knock at the door. Mike raised an eyebrow. "You expecting someone?" "No," I said softly, "but maybe you are." He stood up and walked toward the door. As soon as he opened it, two officers stepped inside, Detective Ramirez and a younger officer in uniform. "Michael Walker?" Ramirez said, holding out a piece of paper. "You're under arrest for multiple counts of domestic assault." Mike blinked, confused. "What the hell are you talking about?" The younger officer moved in quickly and pulled Mike's arms behind his back. The cuffs clicked loudly, like a door slamming shut. "What is this?" Mike shouted, trying to twist away. "Sarah, what did you do?" I didn't answer. I just stood there, a foot away from the mashed potatoes he was still chewing, and watched the scene unfold. My face didn't move. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just watched. "You can't do this," he shouted at the officers. "She's lying. This is crazy." Ramirez didn't even flinch. "We have evidence, sir. Videos. Witness testimony. Medical documentation. You'll have your chance in court." Mike looked at me, eyes wild. "You set me up." I met his gaze and said the only thing that mattered. "No, you did this to yourself." He yelled all the way to the squad car, but I didn't follow. I stood in the doorway, the cold night air brushing against my skin, and let it all settle in. The roast beef was still warm. The wine glass had a fingerprint smudge, and my hands were finally steady. He was gone. And for the first time in years, I felt safe. The morning after Mike's arrest, the phone wouldn't stop ringing. Not from friends, not from well-wishers, but from his family. His mother called first, screaming at me. "You ruined his life, Sarah. He loved you," she cried, like love was supposed to come with bruises and fear. His sister followed, calling me a liar and an attention seeker. I didn't answer after that. I blocked every number. When the news spread, people chose sides. Some neighbors sent messages quietly, saying they were proud of me, that they had suspected something but didn't know how to help. Others avoided eye contact at the store or whispered when I passed by. The same people who had complimented our perfect marriage were now pretending they never knew me at all. Rachel showed up that evening with an overnight bag and a look in her eyes that told me she wasn't leaving anytime soon. She hugged me so tight, I almost broke. We sat on the couch and cried together. She didn't ask what took me so long. She just held my hand and said, "You're safe now." The next day, I went to Gloria's office and signed the divorce papers. It was surreal, 6 years of marriage reduced to a few sheets of paper. But I felt lighter, like I was finally turning a page that had been stuck shut. With Gloria's help, I filed a restraining order. The court granted it immediately. Mike had been denied bail after the judge reviewed the footage and record. Too much violence. Too much risk. Then came the court date. I sat in that courtroom, my heart racing, my hands cold. Mike was there cuffed, wearing a wrinkled suit and a scowl that could cut glass. He didn't look at me. I didn't look at him. When it was my turn to speak, I stood slowly. My voice shook at first. But then I found it, somewhere deep inside. "He hit me over a burnt dinner," I said, looking straight at the judge. "He screamed at me, threatened me, made me feel like I was nothing. But I'm not afraid anymore." I stepped down to silence. But in that quiet, I felt powerful. I had finally spoken the truth. Not just to the court, but to myself. And there was no going back. Healing didn't come all at once. It came in quiet moments, like the first night I slept without checking the locks 3 times, or the first time I let myself laugh without guilt. After the court hearing, I started going to therapy twice a week. Linda, the same therapist who first told me I needed an exit plan, now helped me pick up the broken pieces. We talked about everything, my fear, my guilt, my anger. Some days I said nothing at all, just sat in silence while the weight of years slowly began to lift. Rachel stayed with me for a few weeks. She filled the house with warmth, lighting candles, cooking with me, playing old music we used to dance to as kids. One night she brought out a small canvas and paints from the storage closet. "You used to love this," she said gently. At first I resisted, but one morning, after waking up from a dream that didn't involve yelling or fear, I sat down and picked up a brush. The strokes were shaky, messy, but they were mine. I painted a sunrise, then a field of flowers, then a woman standing alone under a tree. Each one looked a little brighter than the last. I cried less. The tightness in my chest started to ease. My phone no longer gave me anxiety when it rang. I stopped checking the window every time I heard a car pull into the street. The silence in the house stopped feeling like a threat and started to feel like peace. Rachel surprised me with a weekend trip to Nashville. We stayed in a tiny Airbnb with creaky floors and cozy blankets. We walked along the river, listened to street musicians, and ate way too much barbecue. One night over dinner, she cracked a joke about something from our childhood, and I laughed, like really laughed. I hadn't heard that sound from myself in months. Maybe longer. I started tutoring part-time again. Just a few kids from the neighborhood who needed help with reading or math. Being around them reminded me that I had something to offer, something valuable. Their little victories, solving a tough word problem or reading a full page, became my victories too. I still flinched when I heard raised voices in public. I still had bad dreams sometimes. Healing isn't a straight line. But I was moving forward. Every day I told myself, I survived. I got out. I am not what he did to me. And slowly, the pieces of me that had been lost began to return, stronger, brighter, and completely my own. It had been months since the night they took Mike away in handcuffs. Months of court dates, paperwork, therapy, and slow healing. And now, finally, it was the day of his sentencing. The courtroom was quiet when I walked in. Mike was already there, sitting beside his lawyer, looking smaller than I remembered. No rage this time. No smug smile. Just a blank stare at the floor. He didn't look at me, not once. The judge spoke for a while, going over the case, the evidence, and the testimony. My videos. My journal. The photos. Even Rachel had spoken up about the bruises she'd seen, the fear in my voice during phone calls. Then the judge looked directly at Mike. "This was not an isolated incident," she said firmly. "This was a clear pattern of coercive control and domestic violence. The court sentences you to 3 years in prison." There was a silence that filled the room after those words. Mike's mouth opened slightly, as if he wanted to argue, but nothing came out. His lawyer placed a hand on his arm. It was done. I didn't blink. I didn't cry. I didn't feel sorry for him. The bailiff walked over, cuffed him again, and let him out. He glanced back just once, but I didn't return it. He didn't deserve my attention anymore. As I stepped out of the courtroom, the sun hit my face. Warm, bright, almost too much after all the gray I'd been living in. I stood there for a moment, breathing it in, letting the light touch me where darkness used to live. I thought about everything, about the bruises, the fear, the broken plates, the broken promises, about how I used to blame myself for all of it. Then I thought about the words I'd spoken in court, about the laughter I'd found again, the paintings on my walls, the quiet in my home that finally felt like peace. And I said, mostly to myself, he thought burning dinner was a crime. Turns out, being a violent coward was. And now I'm free. Because I was. Free to smile. Free to rest. Free to live without fear. And that, more than anything, was the justice I had been waiting for. What would you have done in Sarah's shoes? Walked away sooner, or waited like she did? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if stories like this speak to you, make sure to hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss the next one.